Well, good evening, board members. This is a special call meeting for Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. This time I have seen that we do have enough members here to determine there's a quorum, so we'll call this meeting to order. Can I have us stand to do the pledge? Mr. Cordero, will you lead us?
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's pray. Be with us, God, in this meeting. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, board members, you've had opportunity to look at your packet and information. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Okay, we have a motion. Can we have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Is there any discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Okay, at this time we go into information. The budget proposal work session for 23-24.
Kevin, is this, well, good evening. Thank you for giving me this time to walk through our budget proposal and this opportunity to present for Pender County Schools as we look at our local budget request. Is it working? All right, thank you for, once again, this opportunity. First, want to start off by just talking about some of the partnerships that we have, and certainly our local elected officials, our county government, for the time and energy and the funds that go into our school system to allow us to benefit our students' future. That's really what this is all about. So thank you to our government as well as our partnerships across the school system. All right, the theme, as we all know, is growth. All right, and we continue to grow Pender County and Pender County schools. Our population continues, as you already know, many of you, and you've seen many of these slides before, but this slide and the next slide talks about our growth. You can see we have 19 school sites currently, 6 pre-K. We have 10,972 students in pre-K through grades 13, which is at that 13th grade is at early college. Now that number is an April 2023 number. So that is a current number of 10,972. Remember, we had over 11,000 prior to January, but we graduated 124 seniors mid-year, which dropped that number down. But that is a current number. On the next slide, you can look at local growth. This slide source comes from UNC Chapel Hill in their demography department, which studies growth across North Carolina in all of our counties. You can see from 2010 to 2020, Pender County ranked 6th in growth rate with 15% growth. When you fast forward into this decade, 2020, 2023, or 2030, you see that we jumped into 5th place. All right, so we are a top 5 district when it comes to growth with a 23.9% growth rate. The point being is that we continue to grow as a county, so too does our school system. And the number of students impacts the number of staff that we have, also the wear and tear on our facilities, which ultimately impacts our budget as a school system. With the local budget falls into 2 categories: current expenses and capital outlay. If we move forward here with take a look at the overall budget for Pender County Schools, it includes federal state, and local funding, which, when we all put it together, comes to our total budget as a school system, which is $125,171,527.12. That's what our budget is. And here, you can see on this graph, it's broken down into the Pender County School overall budget by object code, which is the category of our expenses and our encumbrances. What is important to note from this slide is that 80% to 85% of our overall budget goes to human capital. That's our biggest expense as a school system, with the other 15 to 20% coming from operating expenses, charter school transfers, etc. Human capital, and with the when we look at human capital, we can see that the vast majority is dedicated to inside the classroom, all right, and supervising and supporting and improving teaching and learning, as well as obviously those teachers and those assistant teachers that are in those classrooms. You can see that a little bit better on the next slide, which is our staffing breakdown. This is a bar graph that illustrates our staffing breakdown across Pender County schools. You can see on the first three bars, the first two, 619, are either elementary teachers or secondary teachers. When you add in teachers' assistants, that comes to 731 total teachers. So yes, a vast majority are those actual teachers that are inside the classroom. And then you can also see that across the board, when you add up all those numbers, we have 1,100 employees. All right, there is no doubt that we are a very large organization. Well, who are we? I put this slide in here. You can see, once again, 2021-22, we had a 5.7% growth rate. In 22-23, we had a 5% growth rate. We operate 19 schools, 10,972 total students. But with all of that, we also have a 94.2% graduation rate. And we are not a small district. We are a medium-sized district. That is a very good graduation rate, no matter who you are as a school system. A couple other highlights. Recently, we have Pender Early College, which is ranked as a national blue ribbon school, and that's something to celebrate, as well as we support all military units. We have them in all of our high schools, and recently we added in Coast Guard JROTC out of Topsail High School, which is one of only 6 in the nation. Like I said earlier, 1,100 employees makes us the largest employer in Pender County. And on any given day, when you look at that, 1,100 employees, 11,000 students, we have over 20% of the entire county's population in our schools on any given day. I think there's something to be said about that. But let's take a look at our academic data. Here's some of our regional achievement data in comparison to our surrounding districts. By the numbers, Pender County Schools is a very good school system. The shaded cells on the spreadsheet indicate highest ranking in that category with surrounding school systems. No doubt, we have areas to celebrate, but also no doubt we have areas to improve. We can look at third grade reading there, where we rank 4th out of 5. All right, that's an area of improvement for sure. In addition, we need to look at our grade level reading and math scores across the board as we work to improve in those areas. We will not be satisfied until we are number 1 across the board in all of these areas. That's our goal. We're educators. This is what we do. And so we will not be satisfied until we make those improvements. If we go into the next slide, which is a cost comparison of retirement insurance, let's take a look at these as challenges, all right, that we face as a school system when it comes to our budget. Improvement takes time, all right, it takes resources. The largest resource that we have is our employees. I've already stated that, which many are paid out of our local budget. And there's many reasons for that, and I'll go into that shortly. This chart shows the rising costs associated with the retirement rates, retirement rates and insurance. And you can see here on the left-hand side of this column is the fiscal year. This is a 14-year chart that shows you from 2010 to 2011 all the way up to this year, 23-24. You can see the retirement rate has increased from 10.15% to a projection for this next year of 24.62%. It continues to go up, as well as the hospital insurance. Over those 14 years, you can see that increase. Many of our employees are full-time employees that we hire out of local funds. And when we do that, we have to add in that 24.5% this year and for their retirement as well as their insurance. This is on top of the local stipend that we also pay out of the local budget, which is $900 for certified staff and $400 for non-certified staff. When we look at additional expenses, we have to keep in mind our private schools and our charter schools as well. If you look at this chart, you can see the existing Pender County School students that would be a Pender County School students that have left our system, 325 on this chart. That's quite a bit. So far, we've paid over $476,000 out to private and charter schools out of our budget in order to, and that's by law, and we have to do that, and we do that each month. The note here is that even though we pay out to these schools on a monthly basis, if a student returns to Pender County schools, and many of them do, especially after the 20th day, we don't get any money for those students. All right, and that's something to note. So any student after the 20th day that returns or comes into our school system, there is no money for that student. Our budget is our budget, and that's set on the 20th day of the school year. So we take them, that's what we do. We're obligated to do so, but the budget's the budget after the 20th day.
I have two questions, if you don't mind me asking about that particular slide.
Okay.
The majority of those schools that the private charter, do we have a breakdown of what school they would have been going to, or the majority of those kids going to, would they have been at Topsail, Surf City?
I don't have that breakdown. Anecdotally, I would say yes, they would probably be in that area, but that, because, when we look at those schools where they are located, that would be a very far drive for West Pender area.
The second question, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The second follow-up on that would be, you're talking about the 20th day, which has been going on for a while. Is there any way that we have any representation in Raleigh that there's any way that any of that can be State Board of Education or anything like that? Is there any thought that it could ever be changed?
Certainly if it's there, it can be changed, but I'm not certain if any of our representatives in that have brought that up. Certainly there's something that we can do moving forward is talk about having some of that level of flexibility, getting some of that money that comes with students that enroll, especially in a school system that is constantly enrolling students and is a growing system like ours.
We, at one point, that money was being paid monthly.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still doing that?
It's still being paid monthly, and so you will not lose that monthly amount that we get locally for our local allowance or appropriation. But all of our funds, state down, are reduced for charter schools at the beginning of the year in the allotment calculation. So that's that base money you will not receive back.
So the monthly, the part that you can, I guess, withhold would be the right way to put it, but, depending on how the number changes, did you do that at your other county? Is that a common?
We did, and this past year, they came to the table, the state and the charter schools, and came to an agreement that all districts would
do that.
handle this way. So, that's, before then, no, not every district was doing it that way.
I thought we were kind of the exception for a little while anyway. I
Yes.
think back maybe 2 years or so is my,
Yeah, that's about right.
yeah. Okay.
My only comment on this is, the only question I could see them possibly asking is, how much money have we lost? Or not so much lost, but how many of those students have come back after the 20th day that we've had to educate? I mean,
I don't have that number.
yes, sir, but all I'm saying is, when you make the presentation, that could be a good one that I'm sure they're gonna ask, is how many students, did we lose the money, but yep, they came right back.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Because I know one year we got hit really hard with that when Coastal Prep Academy first opened. It was a mass exodus out of PCS, especially over on the east side. And a lot of them got over there and for a couple different reasons decided they were gonna come right back. Well, it was after the 20th day, so guess what? We lost a lot of money.
And, you know, I'll go on record as saying that I'm not necessarily against private and charter schools. I do think that as a school system, we've got to be better. We have to have a better
Compete,
product than what's out there, and that should be our goal. I'm not afraid to compete. We shouldn't be afraid to compete because we have a great product. But what are they, if somebody is doing something different, I think our question to the families is, why are you choosing those schools? What is it that they're offering that we're not offering? And then make those changes, all right? So you think, I'm not afraid to compete, all right? But why are these individuals leaving? And then how can we convince them that we're doing it better?
Okay.
All right, also, it's important for us to keep in mind that the student who may choose the private or the public charter as a school choice and option come from all of our schools in all grade levels. And so when a student leaves or a handful of students leave, it may come out of a single class or it may come out of multiple classes across grade levels at a school. We still have to operate these schools with the same number of teachers and staff that we would normally. All right, so it's not like they all came out of one school and we can begin moving those resources out that are no longer being used, because it's so popcorn across the district that it's not all from one school and one grade level that we could adjust. We still have schools to operate. So in most cases, the school still has the same need and the same level of support, even though they may have a handful of fewer students. All right, in addition to the challenges of increasing retirement rates, and insurance costs, payments out to charters, and no additional funding after the 20th day, we have class size reduction law that also went into full effect in the 2020-2021 school year. And really what this means is that, as you can see on this chart, it requires us to have a kindergarten average of 18 students with no more than 21 students in any given classroom. Also, first grade is 16 average with no more than 19, and of course, second and third grade is 17 with no more than 20. Overall, all right, this law is an unfunded mandate, really, to our school systems, because when you place those restrictions on lower grades, the pot is the pot of ADM funding that we get. So what we have to do is shift teachers from the upper grades down to the lower grades. All right, and that, if you look at across our system as well as many other school systems across North Carolina, those upper grades classrooms, they have much larger student to teacher ratio in grades 4 through 12 across the board. So that it really is an unfunded mandate. We do have the ability, and you look on the agenda, of a class size waiver, but there are stipulations in that. You can't have a waiver 2 years in a row, all right, for that same class at school and grade level. So that's something for us to keep in mind. Some facts to note, as a county that is increasing our student enrollment, all right, throughout the year. We don't get additional funding throughout the year. We are expected to make it once again through that year with what we are allotted here. And you can see that some elements as well, some funds that we get are just a flat rate. This is what it is regardless of the changes of student population. And those are listed there as well. As we move forward into a highlight, this is one of thing of positive note is Pender County Schools does a great job of keeping our teachers. That's what this map shows. You can see Pender, you can see our surrounding districts and what their attrition rate is of their staff. And so that is something to be very proud of. The number one reason, if you ask across the board, and I did, in all my listening and learning, is why people choose Pender County Schools. They choose it because it's a family atmosphere, the relationships that they have. That is first and foremost. But we must constantly work to offer a competitive supplement and invest in our teachers' professional development to help them grow as professionals. All right, getting into, so now we need to discuss our growth. Now that we've discussed our growth, our achievement data, some of the challenges when it comes to budgeting, now let's take a look at the budget allocation over the last 14 years. And that's what this chart represents, is our local funding and student enrollment. On this chart, you can see the local funding, current expense, and capital outlay, that means, and the student enrollment over the last 14 years. Overall, we have remained pretty consistent over the years. You can see on the left side is the year. The next column is the 20th day enrollment number for our students, from 8,027 back in 2009 all the way up to 10,677. And this is a 20-day number now that we had at that point. The total county funding is more than the amount received on the far right side, which is highlighted in yellow. That is because it includes funding for our SROs that goes directly to the Sheriff's Department for the school resource officer. That's why the current expense and capital outlay in the last two columns, second to last two columns on the right, are a little bit less than the total funding that is put in for by the county. Also, I want to note that, when it comes to capital outlay over the last 2 years, that number has remained the same for our capital outlay as a county.
Can you speak briefly to, so I see that the student population has increased approximately 20%, but the funding, local funding is nearly doubled. Can you explain that, comment on it?
I would say that I don't know the reason, the past history on what their calculations were, other than student enrollment, probably inflation has a part to play with it, and how much is going into our system. I don't know. Outside of that, I don't know the history of why the formula is the formula the way it is. Looking at the year ahead, some of the top financial challenges that we're going to be facing in 23 and 24 school year starts off here with aging buildings and the life cycle projects that we have. As our buildings get older, they require more maintenance, all right, to help keep them up and running. Second, as teacher staff recruitment and retention. In order to be competitive, we must continue to reevaluate our county supplement and invest in our facilities and create professional environments for our teachers. All of our teachers and staff, they are professionals, and they want to come into a professional environment. Exceptional children, educational services. That is another item that is always on the front and to keep in mind. Our county is growing. That means we're growing in non-disabled peers. We're growing in those disabled students as well. And those receiving EC services have additional funding requirements that come with them in those services. Also, teacher allotments and class size limits. I've already discussed, these class size limits didn't exist in 2009, on that chart when we saw the county funding, but they do now. And so we've had to shift teachers. We're not getting more teachers, so we're having to purchase more teachers out of local funding in order to keep some of these class sizes down in these upper grades. Increasing the cost of employee benefits as well continues to eat into our local budget for every employee that we hire out of that local budget. And also whole child support in the area of mental health and safety, our counselors, and our social workers, that we have to look at. And how many do we have? And are they able to service all of our students and families that we serve as a school district? So what can we do as a school system to be proactive in offsetting some of our local needs with funding from outside sources? And here's a list of 18 separate grants that we've applied for and received to support our students in Pender County. But these are not guaranteed, and requires a lot of work and time on the front end, and it's a risk that you may not get in return. You may not win the grant. So nonetheless, though, we will continue to go after these grants. We will continue to push forward and go after as many grants as we can in order to support our students. So, okay, let's talk about some of the additional needs that we have that have been identified for current expenses for the upcoming school year. No, these items that are identified weren't identified in a vacuum. They were identified after countless conversations during my listening and learning series within all of our schools with open forums. So I talked to teachers, I talked to students, I talked to administrators, I talked to parents, and got their feedback on what do they, not just what they love, but what needs to change, and how do we change that as a school system. So there was a lot of input. Also looking at performance data, looking at our resource data, our perception data, and our financial data as a whole. And so here are some items that as a result, we've listed 9 items that we need to look at in order to progress as a school system. First is instructional coaching positions. We're going to ask for 6 positions. Currently, we have 6 instructional coaches. We actually have a vacancy now, so we only have 5, but fully staffed, we have 6. That's to serve over 600 teachers. That is, obviously that, we're pretty much we work to support as many teachers that we can, but each coach, having 100 teachers to support is a lot to ask of them. Also, daily intensive tutoring. When I interviewed for this position, we talked about low-performing schools, and one of the strategies is daily intensive tutoring. That's every day, that small group, 3 to 4 students that are consistent throughout. And we have currently 8 low-performing schools, but if we look at, this is more of a kindergarten through 8th grade model. If we ask for 4 tutors in each school to work with one specific grade level, such as 4th grade math or 7th grade math, we would need 28 tutors. And that's really what that number is about. And working with our high school, we'll work a different model for our high school. In effect, this is a strategy for low-performing schools. Third, increasing elective teaching positions. And listening and learning, talking with teachers, talking with students that wish they had more electives classes, especially in the elementary and middle school levels. And so we are looking for 5 additional elective teachers, really STEM teachers, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. All right, stop using counselors, stop using media specialists to teach those elective classes. We would love, because when a counselor is teaching a class, well, who's counseling? Or when the media specialist is teaching a class, who's operating the media center for students to come in and check out books? That's not happening. They have to shut down those facilities in order to do that. PILA is being paid for out of ESSER funds. ESSER funds are going away. We're going to have to reevaluate how we operate PILA. And that's a school in which many students are finding success. And if we're going to keep that going after ESSER falls away, we'll have to absorb that somehow into our system. Counselors. We're asking for 6 additional counselors. Right now, we have a total of 28 counselors, of which 3 are paid out of ESSER, which I said is going away. That would leave us with 25 counselors. That would be 1 counselor for 438 students. With 28, it's 1 counselor for 394 students. The state average for North Carolina is one counselor for 350 students. The National Counseling Association says that it should be one counselor for 250 students. That would be a large ask, all right? But at least getting to what the North Carolina average is should be what we are asking for, and that's why we're asking for 6. 3 that would replace the ESSER counselors, which is going away, and then 3 additional to give us that total of 6 to keep us at a 1 to 350, very close to a 350 ratio. All assistant principals 11 month. That is a bad model to operate a school system with assistant principals only a 10-month, the same as a teacher. We have so many things that happen during the summer with enrollments, with operations, getting the buildings ready, scheduling. Having a 10-month AP versus 11, that's a game changer for our school system and how we operate our school system. So moving those APs to an 11-month is something that we really must have as we are progressing as a district. Also, an additional of 2 assistant principals. Right now, the ratio at Surf City Middle, Surf City Elementary, as well as Topsail High School is much, that ratio is much larger than the ratios from across the system. And so adding those 2 assistant principals to those, we would split one at Surf City Elementary and Middle, and then one full one at Topsail High School, because they are approaching 2,000 students with their current allotment. Also, additional curriculum director. We have a curriculum director for elementary, we have a curriculum director for secondary. Just as a reminder, we have 8 low-performing schools. We need a curriculum director at the elementary level, at the middle school level, and at the high school level. We have new curriculum that's coming on board. We have a lot of support that we will need when it comes to our coaches. Also, the curriculum directors work day to day in our schools and building, not only building curriculum, but also supporting testing, supporting some other things that happen throughout the district. As you can see here, asking for a testing support stipend. It's a small stipend that would go to our schools so that the AP we can hire somebody to help out the assistant principal that's in there. Because most of our APs are in charge of transportation, most of our APs are in charge of discipline, and other things throughout the day. And when it comes time for testing, offering that additional stipend where somebody would want to come in and help support. Recently, we had our students in here, our teachers in here, assistant principals, prepping for testing. The guidelines for testing, the PowerPoint presentation was 150 slides long. All right, that's a lot of do's and don'ts. All right, and for one person to have to manage all of that is, it's insane. Right? So we're trying to get our schools some help by offering that stipend. All right, so on this last slide here, you can see that we have set this up showing 2 different scenarios. One being maintaining our current status. If we ask for nothing more as a district, you will see it under this column. It says proposed increase to maintain current services. That's just maintaining what we have currently in our system. And then the second scenario is advancing services, and this has to deal with the last slide that I just went over. If we want to advance those services, as well as looking at capital outlay, this would those numbers would help us with the facilities that have been deferred maintenance for quite a while. And so in order to check a lot of those off and get those items fixed across the district, you'll see 2 of these scenarios. So just kind of going over this, you can see our current appropriations in the first column. On the left-hand side, $23,497,000 for current expenses. And then the capital outlay, last year we were given $2.9 million in Fund 4. That proposal for maintaining current services, we talked about retirement benefits, we talked about insurance costs and that. it would be 1.5 million just to maintain what we have now in current expenses with the people that we have. And then expecting no additional increases in capital outlay. Once again, receiving 2.9 million, that would be just maintaining the current status. For 23-24, the minimal budget proposal then becomes 27,958,603. If we look at advancing those services and also looking at the deferred maintenance of our facilities, we would add in a $1.845 million in current expenses on top of that, as well as $2.837 million for capital outlay, non-recurring, for a total of $26,886,000 for current expenses and $5,755,000 for capital outlay, with a grand total of $32,641,000 for next year's local budget. So those are the two scenarios. One is the minimal and one is advancing services. I do want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to present Pender County Schools and our budget proposal for the 23-24 school year. At this time, I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have, as well as staff.
All right, we'll just go down the line then. Mr. Springer, do you have any questions?
Yep, I do.
Okay.
Going back to the operation expenses, 13.2%. We're showing 16 million. Is that including, running the air conditioner during the summertime at the middle and high schools?
That includes our utilities, yes, sir.
So we will be running that during off-season when the students won't be there.
Well, that is not the plan currently. We're going to do that.
We need to do it, yes. I feel like we need to do it. I'm not answering for the whole board, but I don't want to come back with a cesspool full of mold for emails to be coming back to us and us have to come back to you.
We can adjust the set points. We talked about that before, as Mr. Hall and I discussed. We control the set points.
Right.
If we decide to change those, then we can do that.
Okay.
But it will impact the spending for utilities.
Okay. I know that's going to have a little bit of impact. Also, where are we at with synergistics numbers?
I do not have that information yet. Mr. McPherson, have they
I know.
provided anything to you?
I know we're several months before we can cancel, or we're at a point where we can cancel, and I think last month we was at an even point. Is that right, Ms. Nolan? Okay. I know that would help us out as far as not having to pay any more to them. I don't have anything else.
Okay. Ms. Burns, do you have anything?
No, I gave my input as we went along.
Okay. Mr. Hall, do you have any questions, comments, concerns?
No.
Mr. Cordero, do you have any questions, comments, or concerns?
Yes, sir. The PDF document that we received, is there a way that we can get that in Excel format?
Yes, sir.
The reason why I ask is it kind of gets back to, I asked about, students have gone up about 20%, but our spending is nearly doubled over the past decade. And so, I'm not saying that that's unreasonable, but I think that I would at least like to put in a certain amount of effort to a trend analysis.
Okay.
And to do that, like for example, in the last column on this PDF, we've got like a dollar amount increase. I think a percentage amount increase would be a lot more helpful. Where I can see, okay, something goes up 10, 20%, I'd attribute at least 10% to inflation. So, that's not even something I don't look at. But if I see something go up by like 250%, then that's something I'll look at. And in order to manipulate the data to be more helpful, that would be helpful.
Yes, sir.
So if we could get that, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yes, sir, we can do that.
Is there and forgive me for my ignorance with regard to, I've never gone through this process with Pender County Schools before, but do we at any point get the state and federal funding as well on an expenditure budget, and at what point are we going to receive that?
So, you you can get a best guess right now from the state and the federal government, but frankly speaking, until the state passes their budget, we're not going to know anything close to what the numbers are.
I'm not talking about the revenue side, I'm looking at the expenditure side. So, surely we have expenses that we're budgeting for that come from state and federal sources. Or do we just operate with no budget at all? Is that what you're saying?
We operate with a continuing budget.
So you assume the current budget is gonna
That's correct.
continue, okay, so do we receive that data? Because that's, all I see here is local funding, and that is a relatively small portion of the budget, so I'd be curious to look at the state and federal data as well. Again, to conduct a trend analysis and look at other certain things, but we don't have that data at all. So I'm just wondering if we get that, at what point will we get it? Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, this particular presentation is in prepping for our county commissioners, but certainly, which impacts our local budget, but certainly looking at the state and federal budget as well. And I don't know when typically we get that. I've heard that it may be faster this year.
Well, especially, so let's just assume that there's going to be no budget in July, right? Then we're going to use the current budget. So can we get the current, data?
Sure.
Yes.
No.
And that should be, did we not send you like the whole book? And I can send it to you again.
Yeah,
whole
again, it was
current
PDF
budget.
format and it wasn't easily manipulated. So if we could get it in a format, that would be great. And I totally understand that if we were going to assume that there's not going to be a budget passed until July, we're going to use current numbers, but that would be helpful.
Okay.
I can get that to you.
Thank you, ma'am.
You can find things easier in Excel, right?
Yeah. And for example, like if I had an Excel, I could easily turn this dollar number into a percentage number that I think would be more helpful to me in my trend analysis. And then also on the revenue side, on the local side, because this only has expenses, even on the local side, where's the revenue side of this? So for example, like we collect parking fees. There are other use fees and other sources of revenue that we have on the local side. I don't see any of that data here. So when do we get that? How will we get that?
Yeah, that's all done by individual schools when they collect those fees,
But surely it becomes part of the budget, right?
The school budget is not included in our local budget. That's a separate budget. So the revenue side, I do have it projected, but that's not going to shore up until the county actually gives us whatever they're going to give us. So right there makes up the 23,497,509. That's the flat rate of the local appropriation, and then basically $210,000 was budgeted for fines and forfeitures last year. And then I think that's about all that's, let me pull it up, that's on the revenue side for local. There's not but like three or four sources.
You don't need to go into it right now. I'm just trying to kind of share my feedback. So, in your previous interaction with the county, Dr. Breedlove, I imagine you got a feeling for how they will react when we come in the door, and as some on the Board of County Commissioners may say, with our hands out. And I anticipate some of these questions may be asked. And so I'm asking them now with the intention of trying to give you an idea about how we may be able, how at least, in one man's eyes, we might be better armed to answer. Because I feel like some of the county commissioners might ask, what about the federal money? What about the state money? What about these other fees, these other sources of revenue? And I don't want us to be flat-footed, so I'm just trying to arm you with the ammunition, for lack of better terms, to be able to respond to those types of inquiries. Know that you have an ally here,
Yes,
but,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
yeah. And that's all I have. Thank you, Ms. Nolan and Dr. Breedlove.
Sir.
Okay. Does any staff member have anything they want to say? Okay. This time we'll go to our next, is the class size waiver. Mr. Taylor?
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Smith and board members. You have in front of you class size waivers for the spring semester. These are 2 for first grade, 3 for second grade, and for third grade. We have a few as well. So we end up doing this twice a year. and it's based on General Statute 115C-301J. This was also in the PowerPoint as discussed by Dr. Breedlove. So you can look through those and see we've had a total, I think there were 6 last semester, and now we're looking at 7 for this semester.
Does any board members have any questions, comments, concerns before we make a motion to act on this action item?
These will be notarized copies, and Dr. Breedlove will be signing notary copies we sent to DPI. upon
Okay.
approval.
I make a motion to approve the proposed class size waivers.
Have a motion on the floor then. Can we have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Cordero. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
Mr. Chair, can I make a motion to amend the agenda?
Being a special call meeting, I'd have to refer to my legal counsel. So let me ask my legal counsel this time.
So as long as the motion deals with student matters or the 2023-2024 budget proposal work session, those are the 2 items you've told the public you're going to talk about. And so
Okay.
as long as it relates to one of those 2 things, then you can certainly amend the agenda.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure. So, Mr. Springer, after hearing what legal counsel said, do you want to amend the agenda or make a motion
Yeah, I'll make a motion to amend the agenda.
to add what?
To add Mr. Cordero to the read-only, for the financial enterprise system for read-only access.
Okay, so we have a motion. Okay. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, there's a second. Any discussion?
So I think what Mr. Springer's referring to is, I had some discussion with the board members, and I think everybody brings their own expertise to the board. Licensed CPA, I've served as a government finance officer, and I think that the ability to pull reports from the enterprise resource management system that the school system uses to look at expenditure data, look at trend data, things of that nature would help me inform the board, help the board better exercise its fiduciary responsibility in that it would have more information. I'm happy to do that, and I would have the time to do it, and I think it would be useful to the board. So to the extent that the board would find that would be helpful, I'm happy to serve in that capacity as kind of an internal auditor of sorts.
Is there, as the chair, can I make any questions, comments, or anything about this? I guess the question I would have for legal is this being done in any of the other school districts?
I'm not aware of any other school district that has a board member who has a read-only access to, a school board who has read-only access to the budget. That may be something that other municipalities do for certain. I don't know. I don't represent municipalities. I simply represent school boards, charter schools, and private schools. And so in the educational realm that I represent, that's never something I've seen done, for what that's worth.
Is there any information right now that Mr. Cordero is, or any board member is not able to get by this? I mean, what would be the difference by if this were to pass, that what he can already have? Ms. Nolan?
We were able to provide him with any information he requests.
Okay. Is there any other comments, discussions, or anything else from board members?
I would just like to share it. So what I'm trying to do is just streamline the process of obtaining data. I don't want to, I don't want to make any negative comments about responsiveness of staff, but I think that, again, I just want to maybe share a little bit about what I'm asking for. So I'm asking for information that is part of the information technology system that the school system already maintains. These are all public records. So if anybody were to ask the school system, hey, I want an expenditure report for how much money and every check that the school system has written to Synergistics, for example, the school system would be compelled by state law to provide that information. Now, in its current form, I have to send an email to Ms. Nolan or one of her subordinates, and that has to kind of bounce around, and that takes time. What I'm proposing is just I'd have the ability to log in, take a look, and see how much we pay Synergistics or any other vendor. Again, this is all public information. So I don't understand why it would be a bad thing to open the books. I would just ask that if anybody thinks that is a bad idea, that they would share their thoughts on it. Just again, looking for read-only information. I wouldn't have the authority or ability to make any transactions in the system whatsoever. I just have the ability to look into a variety, basically just look at the data that is public data. So hopefully that helps the board understand what we're proposing and where I'd be coming from.
Mr. Cordero, and first of all, just let me say, I think you're coming from a place of wanting to help the Board of Education, okay? And I want to make that real clear. The only thing that kind of concerns me with this is the word audit. And I just worry, the one thing that this man right here, Mr. Mr. McPherson, when we were brought onto the board, the one thing that we kept having drilled into our head was overreach. Stay out of the weeds, stay out of the weeds, stay out of the weeds. Am I not correct? Oh, no. And the only thing that this is, that's kind of hitting me wrong with this is, and like I said, I think you've got good intentions. It's just that no other district really, no other board member really does this. And I'm just worried about the possibility of overreach. That's all.
I appreciate your comments, absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And just to be clear, Mr. McPherson, you're not saying that you know definitively that no other school system does this, right? That's what I feel like some may be interpreting your comments
No.
to be the effect of, and I don't believe that's what you intended to say.
No, that's not what I intended to say. I've been working in this field for well over a decade. I've worked with multiple finance officers across the state of North Carolina, both as special counsel and board counsel, and I've never seen this arrangement proposed. Doesn't mean it's not going on, by the way. Like I said, it's not going. I've just never seen it done.
And it would create no legal liability for us, is that correct? For me to be able to just have read-only access to the transaction data regarding where the school system's money is going. That would not create any liability for us. I just want to be clear. If there is, I want to hear about it.
Well, presumptively. But I mean, I also don't have a crystal ball, and I can't tell you what could happen in the future with that data or otherwise. Does that make sense? Like I can't. But I mean, does the access alone create anything? No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, is there any other questions, comments, concerns? I will ask, and because being that this is such a sensitive issue then, and if you don't want to answer it, you don't have to, Mr. Cordero, when you do put in a request for this information for anything that you're asking for, what is the typical turnaround in that? And if you don't want to answer, you don't have to, or just.
Are you asking with prior requests?
I'm just, yeah, I mean, because I'm trying to see because the information is just the same information that you would be getting, but I'm just trying to figure out how long do you have to wait to get that information, or maybe, I mean, I don't know. Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do understand. I think my best answer would be, in the past, it's been week or two, couple weeks, something like that. But so, for example, we received this evening's budget presentation and data with less lead time than that. So, in order to go through staff, if we're to have the same turnaround time, then I wouldn't be able to get that information before this evening's meeting. However, having the ability to just obtain the data myself, I might be able to ask additional questions and help the board deliberate in a more comprehensive way some of the items that we've discussed. And I'm doing this more for future than this meeting specifically, but I think this meeting is an appropriate forum to bring it up. Does that help answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Okay, is there any other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there anything else? Okay, all in favor of the motion then, if you would repeat, whoever's taking notes can actually repeat the motion, so we can have clarification of it.
So to be clear, Mr. Chair, this is simply the motion to add it to the action agenda. We have not actually added anything to the action agenda at this time.
Right, I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
I was clear on that.
So the motion was to amend the agenda to allow Phil Cordero, to add an item regarding Phil Cordero and access to read-only versions of the budget.
Let me ask something before we go any further. Some of this could go into employee matters. So could the action item be added after for when we come back out of closed session? Is that possible?
It certainly could. That's a board purview. You certainly could have the item at, what?
Table motion.
No, not table the motion, but if he wants
No,
to.
I mean, just
The location of the action item as opposed to.
come back in
coming-
here after closed session.
Yeah, have it be an action item that comes after closed session, so it'd be,
That'd be 5.1.
yeah, we would be doing,
If we carry that on, it would be,
Yeah,
yeah.
6 to 7 and add it.
you move 6 to 7, and then 6 would be action after closed session. Does that make sense? But that would be up to the motion maker to make that motion.
Well, the reason being, so if there are any specific employee questions, could that be, that would be a closed session item? Is that possible today?
That is not possible today because you did not mention confidential personnel information in the
We
public
haven't done a
meeting
motion
notice.
for closed session yet, or are you talking about in the notice?
In the notice, the thing that you told the public you would talk about. Does that make sense? Now, there could be a question asked about what information is contained in budget documents relating to employees. But I don't necessarily know that that's a confidential question. That's not necessarily, but if you're going to seek advice, potentially could be.
Well, anything with finance could also include employee.
Well, if you're dealing with the finance director, that's an employee.
Yeah. Well, but in addition, I mean, there's a question that I think you could ask Ms. Nolan, but I don't know what level of access would allow for, like, if hypothetically, let's say Mr. Cordero were to get this access, would he have access to social security numbers?
Yes,
Okay. So that's,
demographic information, addresses, all of those things that you would then be.
okay.
So to be clear, that's not the type of access I'm asking for, and I know that there are ways to prevent access of those types of data based on my past experience. And if whatever solution, if at all, were to implement, I wouldn't want to implement any solution that would expose me to having that private data. I don't want access to it. I don't need it. It's not my intention whatsoever.
Okay, we have a motion and a second then on the floor to add this, so we'll go ahead and take a vote on that.
I have some specific employee questions which would need to be handled in closed session, so. And,
And if it's more appropriate, and of course, Mr. Spring is the one who made the motion, but I'm happy to continue this matter or table it until the next regularly scheduled meeting, at which time we can discuss anything that we like, right, Mr. McPherson?
That's correct.
In order to address your concerns or any other concerns that might need to be in closed
Unless
session.
you can figure out a way to have it today, because I've not made a motion yet to go into closed session, and at this point, I probably won't, if we're gonna vote on this. Because then I have some questions about closed session, and so, I don't know, can it be modified? It can't be modified for that because of the public notice, right?
The public notice, you've told the public what the things you're gonna talk about today. And so you, in order, I mean, there's no real method to talk about personnel specifically.
I got some personnel questions is all.
Yeah. It's a, no, sir, not today.
Okay, so here's the deal then. We've got where they can make a friendly amendment to the motion. You can also withdraw the motion, or we can go ahead and make the vote now. Is basically how I see it. Does that seem pretty logical?
If we're still in discussion, I do have one question. Mr. Hall, were your questions related to this, or were they separate, related to personnel?
No, it's all related to this. I
Okay,
just
thank you.
want to have a discussion about it is all, and, but, I mean, I have no problem with it being added to the agenda. I just have the question that deals with closed session.
So do we want, so if it is added to the agenda, can it be added to the agenda then after closed session?
It certainly could be, if the board so chose.
Does that have to be added to the amendment?
It would have to be added to the amendment to say, Mr. Springer would have to say, or we could do a friendly amendment to add it to after closed session, if so wished by the motion maker. But that's, once again, if that's what Mr. Springer wants to do.
What would you like to do, Mr. Springer?
Friendly amendment.
Okay, so we have amendment, then it go after closed session then, so we would, if this is approved, it would become item number,
5.1.
yeah, that's how I said 5.1, I know, yes.
I think-
6 is still there.
Adjournment.
Yeah. Okay, well, we have a motion and second then to amend the agenda to add what was just stated to 5.1. All in favor of that amendment or to that placement, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, motion carries then. At this time then,
We're up to closed session.
closed session.
Well, there's a motion.
Is there a motion for closed session?
I move that the Board of Education enter into closed session, subject to advice from the attorney pursuant to NCGS 143-318.11A3 to consult with the board's attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege, to consider confidential student matters as provided in NCGS 143.318.11A1 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 United States Code 1232G and NCGS 115C-402, and to consider and give instructions to the board's attorney concerning DM versus Pender County Board of Education.
Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Springer, second it. Any discussion? Not hearing any. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're in closed session.
Make a motion to come out of closed session.
Have a motion to come out of closed session, second.
I'll second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now we have,
Item 5.1.
item 5.1. All right, so it's on the, do we have a motion then? Do you want to, read the motion again?
As I understand it, Mr. Chair, the item is to allow Mr. Cordero to have read-only access to the budget. That is the action item as I understand it.
Without disclosing sensitive information.
Okay.
Okay,
Do we make that in the form of a motion?
I was just adding.
Oh, you're just adding to the, thank you, sir.
all right, so we have a motion then on the floor. It requires a second. Is there a second? Not hearing a second. The motion dies. Okay, we'll move on then. Is there a motion for adjournment?
Motion?
Have a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Is there a second? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed?